I like what he does.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Eminem.
He's completely brilliant.
I said that a long time ago.
I think he's the first truly postmodern artist in that if you took away his context, like his producer, he's kind of like a fool. But when you put him with his producer and his corporate sponsorship, he's a genius.
I never considered myself anything more than an underground artist.
Slim Shady's your crazy, shady, hazy baby.
I really like him. I think he's a great writer.
His lyrics contain abusive, threatening, and violent fantasies.
Eminem is a hardcore MC. He's supposed to be hardcore.
You're not gonna get birds and bees and flowers and trees.
I love all the controversy.
Maybe he was Skeletor and I was He-Man.
You guys take your cameras and go on back, okay? I appreciate it.
Like everybody has a shady side.
There's Marshall as a ninja.
I don't feel like I have to compromise my style for nobody.
He manages to make beautiful lyrics, literally.
Eminem scratched his ass today!
It does have a lot of talent in it.
In a few short years, Eminem has become one of the best-known artists on the planet. He has won numerous awards from MTV, the Grammys and the Brits. He has achieved #1 albums and singles across the world and already has enough gold and platinum discs to decorate the average rap star crib. All this while creating a wave of controversy over the lyrical content of his songs, being sued by his mother, paying frequent visits to court on gun charges, and getting married, splitting up, reuniting, then planning to divorce his high school sweetheart, Kim. It's been an eventful time for Marshall Mathers. The Eminem story started in the very unremarkable location of Kansas City, Missouri. At only 15, Debbie Nelson was a singer with a local band called Daddy Warbucks. In true rock and roll style, she fell for another band member, 22-year-old Marshall Mathers Jr. They married, and on the 17th of October 1972, Marshall Bruce Mathers III was born. Debbie was ecstatic, but it seems that young Marshall's dad was not so happy. And 6 months after his son was born, he went west to California and out of their lives forever. To this day, Eminem has never spoken to his father. Debbie and Marshall continue to live in Kansas City with relatives, including Debbie's half-brother, Ronnie Polkinghorne. Marshall and Ronnie were very close. Although Ronnie was in fact his uncle, they were a similar age and were more like brothers and best friends than uncle and nephew. Although Ronnie and Marshall seemed happy enough together, things must have been different for Debbie because she decided it was time to leave Missouri. Marshall and his mum relocated to Warren, Michigan, a suburb of the northern industrial centre of Detroit, the heartland of America's motor industry. Debbie's brother, Todd Nelson, was already there to lend a hand.
Right, when Marshall and Debbie first came to Michigan, which would have been 1976, she stayed here with him, and they had no one else to stay. My grandmother's house. This has been in the family since 1952. And she took them in and decided to give them a chance here in Michigan. There was nothing where they came from. In the state of Missouri, in St. Joe, the city, there's absolutely no factory, no production. It was a very, very tough place to live. And they had came here in search of a better life. And Debbie, I thought, did a very good job of finding him a better life. This was Debbie after she came to Michigan. She was transforming her image from the little country girl to the big city queen.
Life in Warren was hard. Marshall missed his closest friend Ronnie and became quiet and withdrawn. But that wasn't his only problem. A small, thin, quiet kid, he was being constantly bullied both at school and on the streets around where he lived. They were tough times for Marshall, who despite his later incarnation as Slim Shady, was not a kid who liked violence of any sort.
There's Marshall as a ninja, and he's about 8 years old there. He's in the kitchen of his mother's house over on Dresden. He never was tough. He was always a real nice kid, but he wanted to portray the image of being tough.
Uncle Todd and his young nephew took fishing trips together, but as Todd recalls, even fishing was too violent for Marshall.
The fishing trip we had one time when he was trying to put a worm on a hook, and he couldn't bring himself to pierce this worm through the hook. And he was saying, oh my God, you know, oh no, it's gonna hurt. It's gotta hurt this little thing. I can't do it. Oh no, you know, he dropped it. He said, I can't put this thing on there. You have anything else we can use? Oh God.
While Marshall was close to his mother, their relationship was often difficult. As a young single parent, she seemed to find it hard to cope and has been described as having wild mood swings. One minute she'd be attentive, the next withdrawn, then the next she'd be in your face shouting and screaming. Later in her life, she'd be diagnosed as having mental health problems. Throughout this time, her brother Todd, Marshall's uncle, tried to help out both his sister and her young son.
He never really had anyone to protect him. And I protected the whole family. Whenever the sisters or anyone had problems, they would come to me. Hey, I need you. You know, whatever the problem was, I would solve it. And with him, I would go in the room and play Masters of the Universe. He loved Masters of the Universe. And he set all these little creatures up. And you know, he'd go, oh, good God, you know, and I'd see him playing with these little toys. And I'd sit down and I'd be the bad guy, and he was always the good guy. He always wanted to play the good guy. He would play with his Masters of the Universe right here. The bed was this way. Skeletor, that's what I was. I played Skeletor. And it was so neat. You know, he really kept to himself. The door would be closed when he'd come over. And you'd open the door and there'd be Marshall. And he had all of his little toys set up. His castle and Grayskull always was right there in the middle. And he would have all his figurines set up. And this is where he lived when he lived in this house.
Marshall's problems with the local bullies reached crisis point in the winter of 1983. He'd been faking illness to stay away from school and avoid the kids who were making his life a misery. His mother seems to have been suffering from the mental illness Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Sufferers of this condition invent all sorts of medical symptoms allegedly affecting their perfectly healthy children. As a result, Marshall was failing at school, but it didn't stop the bullies on the days he did attend. D'Angelo Bailey was the school bully who really made Marshall's life hell. In the winter of '83, he beat Marshall so badly that he fell unconscious and continued to kick him while he was down, until eventually pulled off by a teacher. At first, Marshall just seemed dazed, but later at home he started bleeding from his ears and was rushed to hospital with a brain hemorrhage. Mathers spent the next 10 days in a coma, and doctors told his mother that he might not survive. Debbie sued the school but lost the case. She then decided to quit Detroit and return to the quieter life of Kansas City. In 1984, they both moved back to Missouri, where Ronnie and Marshall were reunited. By this time, Ronnie had become a huge fan of rap and the whole hip-hop culture of rhyming, graffiti and breakdancing. Maybe because he looked up to Ronnie, or maybe just because it was great music. His uncle's enthusiasm for hip-hop rubbed off on Marshall.
My Uncle Ronnie had simply brought me over a tape of the Breakin' soundtrack. Do you remember the movie Breakin'? It was a pretty big movie. It was about breakdancing, and what actually happened was he brought me over the tape, and we started listening to it, and he played me a song called Reckless by Ice-T. And then I liked the song, therefore I stole the tape from him and continuously, repeatedly throughout the day, played the tape and liked it so much that I learned the words by heart and then got into breakdancing at about age 12. I used to carry a little boombox radio with me on my shoulder like this and a piece of cardboard everywhere I went. And sometimes my Uncle Ronnie and I would go to playgrounds and we would throw the piece of cardboard down, simply set our radios down, play the loudest music we could, and we would simply breakdance. I got into rap when I realized that I couldn't breakdance.
Over the coming years, Marshall would return to Detroit to live, but the rap seed that had been planted by Uncle Ronnie stayed with him and became the focus of his life and ambition.
These are all tapes that I've got that I gave him back bags full of stuff that I found, and these are the things that he doesn't want back. Evidently, he doesn't realize the quality or how much I have. This was the first tape that he ever made right here. It's a red one with my dead half-brother, Ronnie. Operator Cool Doggy. That tape has him and Ronnie on there attempting to rap, and it's really, really funny. They were about 9.5 to 10 years old when they made this tape.
Dreams of becoming a rapper were now centre stage in teenage Marshall's life, and he took every opportunity to show the world that they were more than just dreams. He wanted to show off his skills, and at Warren Lincoln High School he performed at a talent show with classmate Mike Ruby, who remembers that Mathers didn't stand out much apart from his rapping talent. Marshall wasn't only performing in school talent shows, he was also winning in the schoolyard battle rapping face-offs. These were competitive rapping sessions where kids would go head-to-head against each other. The first to get tongue-tied would lose out. Even then, Marshall's silver tongue and quick thinking meant that he was winning so often that it was hard to find challenges who would take him on.
I started realizing that I could put words together, that I was actually semi-good at it. And then maybe when I hit about 17, I started realizing that, like, a lot of the that I was writing was better than half of the rappers that were out, like, lyrically, like. So then I hooked up with these guys, the Bass Brothers, back in, I was about 17. And they had heard me rapping over the radio. There used to be this radio station I used to go to every Friday night called, it was like an open mic thing where you'd go up there and you play your demos.
Lisa is now a successful club DJ with a residency in the city's leading venue space. But back in the 90s, she was a hip-hop DJ on what was then Detroit's leading urban music station, WHYT.
Probably about 7 years ago or so, I was at another radio station, and I had a show that I developed called Open Mic Night. And what it basically was young wannabe rappers would audition on the telephone. So they'd call up and say, Lisa, I want to kick a rhyme for you. They'd do a little thing. If it sounded good, I'd schedule them, bring them down, and we actually took them into our production room and produced their song for them. It had to be original material. It couldn't cuss. It couldn't have any kind of obscenity or derogatory language in it. And they would get on the air and actually get their song on, that one song that they did for us here at the radio station.
Mark Bass, he heard me, or I guess coming home in his car or something, and called up the radio station and was like, who is that? And he was talking to us over the air. And he was like, why don't you guys come by? I'm a record producer, da-da-da-da. Come by, check it out. So we ended up hooking up with the Bass Brothers, and they had a connection at Elektra Records. So we got in there and we cut some songs better than demo songs. They were, you know, real, actual studio recordings. Well, what happened was Elektra turned us down.
Eminem's style and lyrics are the two talents most often listed as the reason for his success. They set him apart from other rappers in the mainstream, and although today it means that he is praised by some as a groundbreaking visionary, back in the 90s, this difference was seen as a problem.
When I was doing this program, the predominant form of rap was like the Ghetto Boys, My Mind's Playing Tricks on Me, and Black Sheep, and it was kind of the whole thing about storytelling was more on the gangster side, about, you know, Snoop Dogg was huge back then. And so his style didn't fit that genre. So me coming from a radio background, I didn't see him have radio hit written all over him, because his style was more comical, more storytelling, more kind of out there, like, what are you talking about? Where the other guys were a lot more commercial. They would talk about their girls and their guns and their crew and blah, blah, blah. So as far as his content, I didn't go, oh, wow, this guy's a genius. On the other hand, the fact that he was so different, he did have a whole different kind of rhythm to his rapping. That kind of allowed him to be a regular on the show. I had 4 regulars. He was one of them.
Me and Mark, we kind of went our separate ways. We still kept in touch a little bit, but we didn't really work together. You know, the project kind of fell through, so I was doing he was doing his thing, I was doing my thing. And then a few years later, 3-4 years later, I started making a name for myself in Detroit, just at clubs and whatnot, just rapping and, you know, at open mics and freestyling and battles, competitions and things like that. And Mark heard about it. The Bass Brothers, they heard about, you know, what was going on again, and they decided to give it another shot. So we went with it, and we recorded the album Infinite.
Infinite was released in 1996 and featured 11 tracks by Eminem. It was the album which both the Bass Brothers and Mathers hoped would transform him from radio regular and local freestyler into a commercial success. With Eminem following advice on adopting radio-friendly lyrics and rapping about his life experience, the result was an album mostly about his daughter Hailey and happy family life.
There was maybe 500 copies of the album pressed up, and we just pressed them up locally to see if we could sell them, and they ended up not selling.
I think he was ahead of his time, to be honest with you. Now looking at the success he has, I think rap has come to a whole new life, I guess. It started off East Coast, West Coast, gang banging, fight, 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 girls are hoes and bitches. And now I think with guys like Eminem, it's come into a point where they're actually telling stories, and suburban kids are telling stories that are different from the street life that you would get in the inner city. And I think, so being ahead of his time, I think he was talking about that kind of stuff back then, but when we were playing 8 songs talking about, you know, the Snoop Dogg, the Dr. Dre, the Ghetto Boys, it wouldn't have fit back then. So I think he was kind of just ahead of his time, I guess.
With the failure of Infinite, things went badly downhill for Marshall. He struggled to keep his family together, but eviction from their home and lack of money meant that Kim took Hailey, left Marshall, and moved back to her parents' home.
I reached a point when my daughter was born where I didn't give a anymore. I didn't care. I just was like, I was fed up with so much shit. I knew I had a baby on the way that you know, before she was born and once she was born, I couldn't afford to buy her diapers. I couldn't afford to do anything. I lost my job. I was working different jobs, temporary service, all kinds of jobs just to try to make ends meet. Didn't have anything, you know. Got evicted from the house I was staying at and really reached a point where I just hit rock bottom, so I stopped giving a fuck.
Sinking into depression, Marshall took an overdose of sleeping pills in December 1996. But he survived and with help emerged stronger than ever.
He was tired. He was being threatened and kicked around. He was white. He was going into mostly African-American venues where, you know, what are you doing here? What's he doing here? You ought to be playing rock and roll. What do you do? I rap. What do you rap? Presents? You know, he didn't fit. And it was starting to get to him. And his mother, being, you know, the pusher she is, she pushed him, hey, you're hell no, get off that couch. You ain't giving up. No, put those pills down, kid. Get up. Come on, here, out the door.
Around the time of the birth of his daughter, Mathers was juggling fatherhood, rapping and various day jobs, trying to make ends meet for himself and his new family. One of his day jobs was as a cook at Gilbert's Lodge in St. Clair's Shores. The staff who worked with Marshall are proud to say that they knew him when he was just a cook and not an international star.
We just figured we just went out to, you know, take another shot at something, and next thing you know, it's he's on, you know, MTV and on the radio and stuff like that, and we were all just, you know, kind of awestruck, you know, he finally did it, which is good for him.
His rise has been so fast that for some it seems unreal.
I still can't believe it. People, friends talk to me about it, you know, you knew them and you work with them. It's hard. Not very many people ever get to know somebody on that level.
Yes, very shocked. Yes, I didn't think he'd become so popular so quickly at all, especially because I know him and I worked with him, you know. It's kind of weird knowing somebody that's a big star now.
Mathers worked in this kitchen, turning out orders of fries, burgers and ribs for the lodge clients, although no one knows if he actually used to behave in the way he does in the video for the real Slim Shady, where he spits into a customer's burger before handing it over.
I just thought he was just your everyday cook in a kitchen. We'd always bicker, and then we'd, you know, later on when the rush is over, we're like, oh, I'm sorry, and give each other a hug, you know, I'm not mad at you, and that went on a lot.
I've been in the business a long time, and a lot of cooks are very mean, and he was never like that. Always even keel, to be quite honest.
Busy Friday night, he'd get those orders out in a snap.
Just headphones on. When he got a little lighter, it wasn't so heavy working, he'd rap out the orders.
Mathers used every opportunity to improve his rhyming skills. Everything from rapping out the food orders in the kitchen to checking out the styles of other hot rappers.
We were constantly telling him, please turn down that radio. We're so tired of hearing that rap music.
Well, it was probably because he was so into it and you knew he was focused.
And then when he started rapping, because I'm not big on rap music, the first time he rapped, I just turned and looked at him. I'm like, what are you doing?
He didn't quite expect that because he was quiet.
He may have come across as the